Hello there, United Church of the Valley. I am Sarah Halverson-Cano, and I'm the pastor at Irvine United Congregational Church, IUCC. But once upon a time, I was your associate pastor working with families and children's ministry. So I have such a heart for all of you, and I'm very excited about the opportunity to partner with you in doing some ministry into the future. We're going to start with today, where we'll be doing this a virtual worship experience. I'm actually live and in person at IUCC, and you're experiencing something that we did a couple of weeks ago, but I wanted to take the opportunity to share it with you, and in such a way we're worshiping together. I was so thrilled to hear that the Reverend Bill Allenbach had such an amazing time with all of you just last week, and I hope that you appreciate him as much as I do. We really feel like this is a wonderful way for us to lean into partnership as sister churches, and we want to be able to do more of that in the future. Several folks joined us for our Progressive Christian Study that we held last month, and we want to continue to do more of those things. We want to invite you to join small groups that we could help actually offer you some leadership training, and you could lead those small groups at UCV. Or we might have other opportunities like we did just recently, where you join in maybe in our Bible studies. We have several studies a week. We have lots of adult education classes that you can join in on. Everything we do is hybrid, so that would make it a wonderful way for us to connect. Those that did join us last month know how really easy that is, and it feels like we're connected even if we're not in the same room. I see this as a way for us to lean into ministry together, to continue to do the good work that God calls us to do. We're so excited about the fact that you all have a worship space and can imagine the wonderful things that you might be able to do there as you extend your ministry beyond those walls and back into the community. You've always been a church that knows that it's not about the building, it's about the people and the work that you do. But now you have a building and you can use that building for good. And I am just so happy for all of you as you begin this new chapter of ministry for United Church of the Valley, and I hope that a relationship with IUCC will continue to strengthen you along your call to do this important work and ministry. So today I want to invite you into a time where we think about the blessing of God's creation, and particularly with animals. And as you can see from my stole, I've got some animals here that I would bless, and I know that God blesses as well. And I'm hoping that you're going to be doing a blessing of the animals service yourselves with all the dogs and cats, and I like a good snake every once in a while. I've blessed goldfish and parakeets and parrots. All sorts of animals. I even blessed flying squirrels once. So I hope you have a diverse body of your congregation that includes fin and feather and lots of fur, as well as the old human type. This is a great opportunity for you to reach out to your community, and I know this is your first time. Maybe next year you could advertise it more widely and invite folks in, and they could get a chance to see your worship space while also getting to know all of you and the incredible people that you are. So I invite you into this time. I thank you so much for allowing me to reach to you through this miraculous technology that we have. And I hope that you will enjoy this service and the sermon that I've prepared for you. And I hope that we can continue to lean into this partnership and this ministry. Know how much it fills my heart to reconnect with you all after all of these years, and to continue to do the good work that God's called us to do, to follow Jesus from the first century into the 21st, and to do so in out-of-the-box ways as we embrace a ministry that is really beyond the norm. And I think ultimately that's what's going to lead us into our future. So thank you so much for having me. I wish I were in person and could give you all a hug, but I hope that we can continue to do this kind of worship together, and I'm excited that we're doing it now. Looking forward to seeing you all sometime soon. Enjoy the worship.
I used to write pretty regularly for the Daily Pilot, which is the Costa Mesa, Newport Beach local paper connected with the LA Times. And one day I was asked a serious theological question. Do animals go to heaven? Now, there was an animated film that came out when I was a kid. Remember it? Called All Dogs Go to Heaven. Now, I don't recall if I actually saw it. But as I understand it, the premise was that all dogs are inherently good and loyal, so therefore, as the title suggests, all dogs go to heaven. And why shouldn't they, right? I mean, if there's only two alternatives, where are they going? Who would condemn a dog to hell? Apparently some would. I guess we all got to go watch that film. But I suppose this is why it was newsworthy, a question that I should answer for the good people of Newport Beach. Folks really wanted to know if their pet would be waiting for them in heaven. Now, I don't actually subscribe to this three-story universe cosmology with Earth on this plane and hell right below and heaven just beyond the clouds. But I can understand that if you do, you want to know if your pets will be there for you in heaven when you get there. Now get this, even the Pope has weighed in. He is said to have comforted a little boy by proclaiming, one day we will see our animals in the eternity of heaven. The very fact that I was asked this question, that people find it notable that the Pope would address it, reminds me just how important animals are to people. That if there is an eternal place, they want their dogs or cats or birds to be there. Now, initially, I kind of laughed this whole thing off. Like, what a strange question to ask me. It just reminded me of the stuff of cartoons from my childhood. But what I've realized over the years, and can actually personally relate, is that there really is something powerful about the bond between humans and animals. There's maybe even something holy about it. I can speak personally about the impact that my dog had on me. She was probably the most religious dog ever. Seriously. It was a dear rabbi who convinced me that I really needed to get a dog. See, I was a single woman living alone, and I just experienced a break-in. I was pretty shaken up by the whole experience, and she thought I should get a dog. While a dog might make some noise and keep intruders at bay, more than anything, it was so I would feel like I wasn't alone. So my rabbi came down from LA, and we went to the OC Animal Shelter together. And that's where I first met my beagle. It took me 3 trips before I was certain, because I didn't want to make a spontaneous decision. But it was clear. She was my girl. She had this funny little snort that reminded me of a pig, so much so that I almost named her Charlotte, but then I remembered that the pig was named Wilbur. The spider was Charlotte, that's why it was her web. So my rabbi told me to name her after a disciple of Jesus. But she's a girl, I complained. Cough, cough. Aren't you a feminist? Aren't you a scholar? Hello? Oh, yeah. So that's how she got her name, Maggie. Full name, Mary Magdalena Halverson. Over the years, she'd be dog sat by my Methodist clergy friends, a Disciple of Christ pastor, and soon she'd have godparents, American Baptist clergy, who loved her as much as I did. Yeah, she was super religious. But she was more than just religious, bigger than the tribes. She really did open a window to God for me in a way unlike anything else I'd really experienced. We talk about it often, the unconditional love of our pets, and it is true. She was there for me. She welcomed me home when I was tired and grumpy, wagging her tail, reminding me that life is good. I couldn't not smile at her joyful greeting. So much love and excitement, as though I were the most important person in the world. She let me bury my head into her fur with tears when life was just too much. She saw me at my worst. I would be vulnerable with this dog in a way I wouldn't with any other human being. Maggie kept me sane. She reminded me that I was loved. She was non-judgmental, didn't care if I was fat or out of shape, if I was taking my dinner late or falling asleep on the couch. She was just right there with me, loving me, cuddling me, supporting me. And as much as I love my family, I do, nothing will replace the bond that the two of us had. And even though that bond felt incredibly unique, I would bet that one of you here today, maybe more, knows exactly what I'm talking about, because you have experienced a bond that's unique to you and your pet. It was crushing when she died. In fact, I say it half jokingly, but not really. She died for me. See, she'd been diagnosed with cancer in January of 2017, 2 days before the Women's March, when I was asked to be one of the first speakers and represent all of my liberal clergy colleagues and give the opening invocation for our march here in Orange County. But we were told that she would die any day. They could perform this technique, this procedure that would drain her lungs, and it might give her a couple more weeks. So I knew I had to get through that weekend. Of course, we did it. And then 2 weeks went by, and we were scheduled to go to Prague, which, though we hadn't told anybody at the time, was for fertility treatment in hopes of expanding our family. So I looked into taking her with us. Winter in Prague. That didn't seem like a very good idea. Dog on her deathbed? No. I didn't just want to put her to sleep, though, because that felt like she had to die on my timeline. Her godparents said that they would take her, but they felt like I should be with her when she died. I was beside myself with stress as I prepared to be gone a month from my church, and all the money that we were about to put forward on this gamble for a baby, and the heartache I felt knowing that my sweet confidant, my selfless cheerleader, my unconditional source of love was dying. It was a Saturday, and of course I was dumb enough to schedule my flight for late afternoon Sunday. I had a memorial service that Saturday morning, and we were finishing packing. Our 2-year-old was squirmy. I was prepping for Sunday and this month-long goodbye to my congregation. At the time, they thought I was just going for one of my months of my 3-month sabbatical, not knowing all the infertility pressures we were holding. And with all of that, I was grieving what was about to happen. So we made a plan. We would go to the 24-hour vet late that night after Molly had fallen asleep. But at about 5 p.m., we realized it was time. She was ready. Fortunately, Molly was taking a late nap. Marquise drove, and I held Maggie in my arms. And that sweet dog did what I couldn't. She let go. I know it sounds a little bit silly, but I believe it. She died for me because I couldn't bear to put her down. Had she been in pain, of course I would have done it. But I just could not bear to force her death to be on my timeline. So she fitted in the most convenient of ways. While my toddler slept and my husband drove, she died in my arms. We got there, they confirmed it. A tearful parting, and they took her remains, and we returned home, back to the stress of a Sunday morning the next day and an airplane flight that afternoon. But she couldn't have made it easier on me. Even though it was so hard to go through, we had this most beautiful death experience. To tell you the truth, it's still painful to reflect upon it, even now, almost 5 years later. I still grieve her death. I read an article about how when pets die, we are often more affected by their deaths than the death of some human friends and family members, because their death affects our daily lives and our daily rituals. We cannot wake up, leave the house, return home, or go to sleep without our daily life being disrupted by their death. For many, this can be crushing because when their pets die, this disturbance of life causes everything to be upside down. And of course, because of the intimacy that we share with our animals, they are a very real and important part of our families. You may have noticed this, but we Americans, we're not that great at grieving. It's really hard for us to be vulnerable in front of other people, and it's hard for us to know what to do when someone is vulnerable in front of us. So we tend to keep our pain to ourselves. I think we're getting a little bit better about that, and I actually think it's due to social media because people put their grief out there and others receive it. It's debatable, I know, but I think it offers us this new way to express ourselves. And for those of us who lose our pets, we can pay tribute to our animals and receive a little love in return. And I think that does help us to grieve. And yet, even as we've become more accepting and sharing to a wider circle, it rarely seems opportune to hold a memorial for pets, even though we might actually need that. Because our hearts do need to grieve, and so often we grieve silently. It feels a little weird to talk about how off we are because our pet just died. But really, this grief is real, and we experience it. So after years of holding a blessing of animals at Fairview Community Church, where I pastored, we began to hold a memorial moment for pets as part of that service because we knew how important it is to acknowledge our pain and celebrate a life, even, and perhaps most especially today, in animals. So if you decide to come at 3 p.m. and you have a pet that you are grieving, please bring a photo and we'll pause to hold space to remember. It seems like our animals are always teaching us something, even if it's that, how to grieve, how to receive love. Most of us will outlive our pets many times over in a lifetime, and so we know that loving our animals also means learning how to let go. Even in their death, they are teaching us something about grieving, which means they're teaching us something about living as they also teach us about dying. Maggie gave me that blessing. They are such blessings. The pets of our lives are certainly a blessing. They're part of our family. They have so much to teach us about love and life, about God, about our connection to God's creation. I think they remind us on a micro level what we ought to be mindful of on a macro level, that we're all connected. And those of us who have pets know that we have this real connection with our animals. They are sentient beings. They demonstrate love and care. They have their own unique personalities. It's not just domesticated animals, though we who have them get to witness this on a daily basis. They remind us that each living creature is a blessing, each a very real reflection of God. How dense to imagine that only human beings were created in the image of God. Come on. Anyone who's ever had a pet knows otherwise. Anyone who has seen a whale surface and descend, anyone who has watched the tiniest hummingbird flit from flower to flower, anyone who has been privileged enough to witness a giraffe extend their sleek neck to nibble a leaf, or an elephant train cross across a plain. Anyone who's seen a caterpillar morph into a chrysalis and become out a butterfly. Anybody who's been underwater, snorkeling, watching the colorful garden of an underwater world come to life with darting fish, resting rays, and ancient turtles. You know. Deep in your soul that the divine is among us. And thus we have a responsibility to this divine creation and all the creatures among it. And we, as a species, we're failing. We cannot bless our pets without being mindful of the need to return that blessing far beyond our homes. Yet we are so culpable. I know I'm preaching to the choir. You are an incredibly faithful congregation. And that is why it is important that we lean into our green faith ministry, because we have a responsibility. As we address climate change this past week in particular, as international leaders come together to discuss the environmental impact human beings have on our world, we, you and me, have to do this from our unique, progressive Christian perspective. Because here's the thing. While some people are preoccupied with knowing whether or not they're going to be reunited with their animal in heaven when they're dead, we know that Jesus asked us to open our eyes to a kingdom of God on earth. Now, we intentionally changed that translation of kingdom, which is usually said in English, from the Greek word basileia, to kingdom, to recognize our interconnectedness as a family of God, a realm, then, of connection. And for us, a mandate to create heaven on earth, to create that kingdom on earth. To be honest with you, that's the gift that our pets usually give us. My Maggie, she certainly gave that to me. She was my slice of heaven, an embodiment of God's unconditional love. Do I think I'll be reunited with her when I die? Yes, I do. Because she was and is love. And I believe the Apostle Paul was right. Love is what shall remain when nothing else does. Love is eternal. But what I'm most concerned about is not a heaven after death, but that mandate to create a heaven on earth. And it seems to me the animals are making good on that part of the deal. Someday I'll tell you about my spiritual experience in Africa. I was singing Disney's Circle of Life. But the gist of it for now was this wow moment. As I realized how incredible the animal world is and how much of an impact humanity makes to pretty much mess things up. And man, we have messed things up. So it's up to us, progressive Christians who recognize our responsibility to creation, to the animals, to clean up our act quite literally, and do our part to create heaven here on earth. By advocating with our voice, our pen, and our dollar, through our actions, our choices about how we live and what we buy and what we don't buy, and what we create together. I think it's particularly important that as progressive Christians, we speak loudly about our responsibility to now, to here on earth, not in another future, far off, distant place. Our faith calls us to not just believe, but to do, to act, to care. Because the question doesn't have to be, will our pets make it to heaven? But will we work to ensure that heaven is manifested here and now and into the future? They're already doing their part. I can assure you of that. They find a way to live in harmony, respecting the earth, their environment, and all of our homes. We owe them that same respect. So perhaps we need to turn to them, to ask them, for they can teach us. The birds of the air, and they will tell you. Ask the plants of the earth, and they will teach you. And the fish of the sea will declare to you. We human beings still have a lot to learn. But we're fortunate there are still good teachers out there. And what a blessing that is. Amen.